Welcome to the Bucket Plan on Demand, a podcast for financial advisors based on the best-selling book and process that simplifies financial planning. Hear from skilled industry professionals and special guests each episode that will help perfect your approach with clients and your results.
Good morning, C2P. I'm Kirsten Schlumbohm, Vice President and Head of Annuity Sales here at C2P. And anytime I get a chance to talk with Betsy Larson about what she does and how she helps her clients, I get excited. Anybody who knows me knows that this is near and dear to my heart based on my experience with my family. So Betsy Larson is a financial advisor here with us at C2P, and she works in special needs advanced planning as well as comprehensive financial planning. So Betsy, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited. Obviously, it's early here on the West Coast. I'm all pumped up with caffeine. During this time, it's meant to be interactive. So if you've got questions, please throw them in the chat. We're happy to answer them. And Betsy has a wealth of knowledge. But before we talk about the knowledge, I'd like to take us to Betsy's origin story. So can you share with us how your professional journey and personal journey has led you to focus on special needs financial consulting?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I have four little sisters with Down syndrome that have pretty much been like the guiding light of every decision that I've ever made in my entire life. Like I remember in elementary school, I was part of the buddy program, and then I was helped with Special Olympics in college, and then I got on the board of Gigi's Playhouse, which is a Down syndrome organization near me. And when I first joined my dad's practice, I think it was like 5 years ago now. I didn't intentionally go into special needs financial consulting, but I had talked to a friend of mine who has a son with pretty severe disabilities, and was doing some research for her. And I just kind of realized that there's it's just a very underserved community. It's really complicated. There's a lot that goes into it. So I decided that that's really where my heart lies. And those are the families that I feel most compelled to work with. So it's the way that I went.
Well, they say if you do what you love, everything else will fall into place. So working from a place of passion, things fall in place. But with your personal connection and professional focus on special needs planning, what are some key considerations families should keep in mind when creating a financial strategy for family members with special needs? Because it's not the same. It's changed a lot since my parents were 1964 is when my sister was born. It's come a long way. So please share with us what they should be looking at.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing that I always do with my clients is I ask them to bring in their estate plan if they have one, and we go over that and then have somebody review it who is part of the special needs community on the attorney side of things. So I have a whole wealth of attorneys that I know that are in this space. So I have them review their estate plan. If they don't have an estate plan, we go and get that on the schedule right away. Another thing that we go over is really understanding government benefits and how that might be able to help them fill some specific gaps within their plan. So really, as an advisor, understanding what those government benefits are, and they're state specific in some cases. So you need to really make sure that you understand what's in your state or the state of whoever you're working with if you're more of a virtual advisor and you can work with anybody in the country. Another is understanding ABLE accounts. That's a huge benefit to families right now that have children with special needs. That's a way for you to be able to save money for them without harming their eligibility for those benefits. And then a big one for me is the memorandum of intent. Now, this is not a legal document, but it's a document that I think is really important, especially in times of transition, because what this does is it lays out specific information when it comes to doctors, your finances, any therapies they might be a part of, or any important people that they need to know about in their lives. But it also talks about specific, I don't want to say quirks, because, well, we all have quirks, right? We all have our preferences and things like that, but specific things about that person that during a time of transition that the next caregiver may need to know in order to make that time of transition easier. Because it's already going to be difficult, but it might make it slightly easier by knowing these things. So that's a huge one.
Do you have a checklist that you use with each client, or do you give them something to help them understand this journey that you're on with them? Because it's not going to be easy when I think about the lives I've interacted with and the special needs and the different personalities that come along with that.
Yeah. So I do have kind of a little roadmap that I have created of these are the different things we're going to do first, and kind of goes in a circular motion because it's the laws. Everybody knows that the tax laws and everything is always changing. So we need to constantly be revisiting it. But yeah, I do have a a roadmap. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is, you come in for your first meeting, you bring all of your documents, we hear your life story, and then we go into making sure that you have kind of reviewing everything that you do have and determining what gaps you may have within your plan and how we may be able to fill them, and then kind of go on from there through the entire bucket plan process, really.
Okay. So you've added and implemented the bucket plan process into
Oh,
your
for
special
sure.
needs. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Now, it's very likely that the advisors turning into the coffee break this morning maybe not have had to deal with the type of client base that you have. Should a client with a family member with special needs come into their office tomorrow, what are some of the things that advisors should keep in mind when going about their job, especially when they're implementing the bucket plan as well? So that being said, what are the best benefits or best practices that can be offered to the families that have special needs planning?
Yeah, I mean, especially when somebody is first coming into your office. I don't know how many people have gone through the bucket plan training, but going at least 2.0, I think we go over the connection questionnaire a ton. And they talk about really listening and really hearing people. And I think that the biggest thing that you can bring to a family that you've just met that has children with special needs is your empathy and like really hearing them and listening to them and just allowing them to express whatever they feel they might need to express at that time, like putting on your therapist hat. So for example, I've had some clients who come in and they're totally like fine with how their life is. They just want to make sure they put a plan in place. They're really optimistic about the future, but they want to make sure that everything is set so that if anything happens to them, their children are okay. But I've also had people come in who are very angry. They're really unhappy with how their life has turned out. And you just allow them to express those frustrations because those are going to be key parts in their planning process too. And then just remind them in a gentle way that like, that's what you're there for. We can only move forward from here. So let's like create this plan and try to see how we can make things better for you. But just allowing them to feel what they need to feel and letting them know that it's okay. It's okay for you to be not happy with how things have turned out in your life, but we're here to help you help take some of that off your shoulders.
Sometimes giving permission for them to have the emotion is the most important thing because it is a whirlwind. There's so many laws, there's so many parts that can move. And if you're surprised by the diagnosis or you're not ready for it, it can be a really emotional conversation. So since it's a rewarding job that you do, it's rewarding to help people with special needs planning. But can you give us an example where you had a challenging situation and you overcame it and how you did that? I know you talked about being empathetic, but can you give us an example?
Yeah. Well, so this one was more of they were optimistic about their future with their child, but the mom had some pretty serious health challenges. Still going through them to this day, but we're working through that. She is optimistic. She's not optimistic, but it has good spirits about it. But because I let her express her worries about what her future might not be with her children. You know what I mean? I think that allowed her to feel more comfortable with the whole planning process. I let her talk about all the things that she's worried about in the future. And I think that it's helped her relax into it and know that we're going to put a plan in place so that everything's going to be okay, no matter what the future holds for her and her family.
Well, anytime somebody's talking about their children and they might not be in good health, regardless if it's special needs planning or holistic planning it can be very emotional. Since you do embrace the holistic approach to financial planning, how is that approach helping working with your client base?
Yeah. Well, I think that especially, in our work, I think that the holistic approach is really the only approach that you should really be going for, because that's how you can really serve your clients. But I really believe that implementing the bucket plan with a couple of additional things, like I talked about the memorandum of intent and understanding all of those public benefits and things like that. I think that the bucket plan really allows you to have that holistic approach, but simplify it so that it's really digestible for the families. I think that once you go through and you explain, or you go through and you determine what the gaps are in the plan, how you might be able to help fill those gaps, and then show the bucket plan and how we've got this now money, we've got this soon money, we've got this later money, and really help them to understand that they're going to be okay with this really simplified approach. But we all know that it's also robust. It's simplified, but robust. I think that just helps them to really feel confident in their future.
It's simplified sophistication. And when you're working with a complex case with somebody with special needs in your planning, it's more than just money, it's emotions. It is, if I'm not here, who's going to take care of my child? I had the same fears with my sister. If my parents weren't there, how am I going to take care of my sister? Because there's no one like you with your sister. There was no one else Jenny was going to cling to but me
Yeah.
because she was my girl. John Jenkins asked a really great question, Betsy. What types of plans are you setting up for the love, the care, and support of the children after the parents pass? Because he says he finds that this is like the biggest concern that he finds when
is.
talking with parents. So what kind of
Yeah.
plans can you help set up?
So that's why one of the very first things that we do is the estate plan, because we need to make sure that there is somebody in place to make sure that, whether it's a trustee of a trust or guardianship, if they decide to go that way, or just a trusted group of people that they can rely on to help them make their guided decisions. That's one of the very first things that we do. We have had a couple of people that have not really known. We don't have family that we can rely on when it comes to if something happens to us, where do they go? But that's something that we work through together. Everyone's going to have a different situation there. Some people have children that they can utilize. Some people have other family members, but some people don't. And when it comes to like trusts, what's really helpful is having a corporate trustee for them to be able to utilize when it comes to, a successor trustee being a corporate trustee. But again, when it comes to guardianship or who are they going to live with next, that's just something that you really have to have big conversations about. I hope that answered your question, Jen.
Well, they are big conversations because if you don't have family, there's friends that become family that you might be able to trust in that situation. And guardianship, if your child has severe disabilities, you have to go ahead and apply for guardianship when they're 18, because when they're 18, they're considered legal adults.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that my parents didn't even think about. They thought Jenny was 18, that because she had Down syndrome and lived with them, they had the rights to make decisions.
That was enough.
Yeah. And so there's some misconceptions. Now, Charlie has a really great question too, because how do you address it when parents are severely underinsured with life insurance and they don't have the means to obtain permanent coverage? What do you do? How do you help?
So we have to get a little bit more strategic about that. A lot of times it'll be on whatever they've been able to save up. That's why a lot of times we really go through what they currently have and then find benefits that we can utilize to fill in a lot of gaps. Because if they are uninsurable and if they don't have a lot saved up, because a lot of families, they don't have a ton because they've been spending all of their money on therapies and all of this other stuff. So that's why really diving into what your state and the government will allow you to utilize is really helpful when it comes to housing. Maybe it's Section 8 housing vouchers. Maybe it's SSI, maybe it's a combination of SSI and SSDI. So, I mean, there are some strategies that you can pull in. The uninsurable part is it can be really difficult when it comes to, funding a special needs trust. If you don't have any money to fund a special needs trust and you are uninsurable, we have to maybe look at potentially a pooled special needs trust where you can put a little bit less money, but it's commingled with a lot of other money and worked with that way.
Can I jump in real quick? We did a lot of special needs trusts in South Carolina over the 30-something years that I was there. And, one of the biggest problems is that a lot of people didn't even know they needed them, And so that's important with grandparents and parents that you talk about that and you uncover the need. And it's a no-brainer after that. But I've had some really educated people, doctors and professionals that were planning on taking care of their needy grandchildren, or even had kids of their own, and had no idea that they needed a special needs trust. So make sure you ask and you uncover that need, as you're going through your bucket plan and whatnot.
Well, can I piggyback off of that a little bit?
Yeah.
So I love everything that you just said, Carla. And what's really important too, especially when you're dealing with a special needs trust, I advocate for having a family meeting, because you might have an aunt or a grandparent or a friend who is, I want this money. I'm going to give it to their child. I'm going to save this chunk of money for my friend's child who has disabilities, and they're going to be the beneficiary of it. What I would say is we need to have a family meeting of anybody that you think potentially might leave money to your child, so they know exactly how they do that, so they don't harm their eligibility for specific benefits. So having that family meeting so that everybody's on the same page, it can be a little bit uncomfortable because, you're asking if people are going to give your child money, but just to make sure that everybody understands exactly the way that needs to be done to make sure that this plan that we've put into place isn't just all thrown off kilter because somebody left, $100,000 of a life insurance policy to your kid and you weren't expecting it. So,
Betsy, you don't even have to ask them if they're planning. You just educate them in a meeting.
You're right.
Basically.
Yeah.
But that does lead me into our next question. So, Carl, thank you for that toss of that ball, because since to flip things around really through working with your unique client base, what have you learned or what lessons are you learning or tips that advisors could take into consideration in their everyday interactions with clients? And I feel like that was a good tee up because you're saying, bring your tribe together. Let's educate our tribe and talk about what our plans are for our child with special needs. But what other things do you recommend?
I mean, so the empathy, I think, is just a really big one always for any client. I mean, just having that, everybody knows somebody who has a disability. So I think that giving that education is helpful, asking those questions, because there might be, there were actually, I think there were clients of my dad's that had come in and they did not divulge the information that they had children with special needs. And my dad asked the question. So it's important to ask those questions because that totally changed how we would have originally done planning for them. So just being empathetic, being inquisitive, not being afraid to ask these questions because there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing shameful about saying, like, hey, do you have anybody that has a disability in your family that you have to, you want to make sure that you're planning for? There's no shame in that. And I don't feel like people should feel any shame in that, but it does happen. So make sure that you're asking the questions and I guess empathy and asking lots of questions. Those are my big ones.
I think sometimes people shy away from the hard questions. And I think that's a question that people think, I don't want to upset anybody. But, for us that have had family members with special needs, my sister was my heart. So I almost expect you to ask me about that. Don't be afraid. If you don't ask, you're not really doing your job. So make sure you're asking. It's really important. Now we have another question. Erica's got a legal question for you, Betsy. What kind of process do you recommend to get the right trustee in place? Are siblings or relatives better than choice in a professional like an attorney?
Yeah, so I actually really like to marry a relative if that's who they choose. So whether it's a relative or whether it is a family friend, I like to marry that with a corporate trustee because what that offers is a corporate trustee is going to know all of the laws and know how all of these distributions need to be made in order to not harm their benefits. But like a family member, I think will really allow you to have that like more personal connection. Also, marrying those two allows kind of a scapegoat situation for the family member. So say that my sister, I'm the trustee of my sister's trust, and she asks me for some specific dollar amount that I don't feel comfortable giving to her, but I don't want to say no to her because I want to make sure that we stay I want to make sure that we have a really close relationship. I can say, hey, you know what? That corporate trustee is being a jerk and they will not give us any money, and so, I mean, I just think that having both of those as co-trustees is just a really smart way to go about it. And I mean, a lot of times people they don't understand all of the rules and the laws that have to go into making these distributions. So having somebody that is just their sole job makes your life way easier.
I do like the idea of marrying it with a corporate trustee because it does take the weight off the emotional part of the decision, especially if you have somebody who doesn't understand the consequences of the money that they're taking out, or possibly doesn't understand that when you say no, it's actually giving them a yes answer because you're protecting them from not having the money there for future needs. So I love that. I'm going to flip it to your marketing campaigns and things that you do to get in front of more clients and to help your clients with special needs. You've got a special needs webinar special needs planning webinar coming up. Can you tell us about that?
Week. Yeah. So it's going to be an hour-long webinar all about special needs planning. And we're just going to dive really deeply into government benefits, how you get them if it's applicable to you. We're going to talk about special needs trusts. We're going to talk about ABLE accounts and marrying those with special needs trusts and how I think that can be a really positive, beneficial way of distributing money to a person with a disability with an ABLE account. And then really diving in deep into that letter of intent. I know that I kind of touched on it before, but I really think this is a crucial document because it's one of those documents it's kind of a lot of work to put together in the beginning because you're pulling together a lot of information. but then we just revisit it once a year to make sure that it is still up to date and still relevant and all of the information in there. But that way I have a copy of it and they have a copy of it. And then I would like to, I have, right now, I don't have the attorneys having it, but I think it'd be a really good thing to have the attorney have a copy of it as well. But that way, once there is a time of transition from a parent to the next caregiver, they have all of this information to make that time just slightly easier. Like I had mentioned before, you've got your doctor's information in there, you've got all the medications that you're on, all the therapies that you do, but it's also really small things. Like, for example, my youngest sister, she has autism and Down syndrome, and she is very sensory specific. Like, she does not like certain sensations. So if her sock is on wrong, like the seam is not correct on her sock, she's going to have a horrible day. And the next caregiver, although it's going to be me, it will be. If the next person didn't know that about Rosie, it could just be a terrible day that could have been really easily fixed. So those are the types of things that go into the letter of intent. We'll dive really deeply into that because I think it's just so important.
2 things. Tim, if you're listening, I think Betsy's calling you out. Secondly, I'm getting questions about your webinar. It's on May 9th. Is it something our advisors with C2P can join and listen and learn from?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think that advisors and families can really benefit from listening to this webinar.
Okay, so after this coffee break, we'll send it out. We'll get a copy of it and get it out to everybody on this coffee break today, because it is important to educate yourself, because you never know when you're going to have a client come in that has a special needs planning issue or challenge that you need to help solve. And love to continue to share your knowledge with C2P. Having you and Tim a part of our organization, we're lucky. We're blessed to have people with such specialized niches that understand, that can coach and help clients not be embarrassed about the situation and not be concerned, because you help them lay out the right plan. So 1, we'll get you that information on the webinar. 2, if you want more time with Betsy to learn more about what she does, she is on our Mentor Connect platform. So you can schedule one of your 2 or use both of them to schedule time with her to talk more in depth about a case or how you can do more for your clients. So
be happy to help.
Yeah, please go out, leverage Betsy. She's great to work with. And I absolutely love the fact that you and your sisters and your dad are a part of our organization. That being said, any closing thoughts when it comes to special needs planning?
From a marketing point of view, we've had Linda in our office for, I guess, 14 years now, but she does a lot of these seminars or podcasts and things of that nature. And we team up with her, and it brings in clients that we would have never met before from the special needs end of it, so we can do the planning for those people. So don't overlook that as a great marketing tool when you're doing your podcast or you're doing seminars or things of that nature.
Thanks. I also do have I can drop my website in there too, but I have a YouTube channel that I just put on. They're like 5 to 8 minute little videos, but just informative for anybody to go look at. And you're more than welcome to head over there as well.
Fabulous. Now we'll make sure you get all the information on Betsy for Mentor Connect, for her webinar, where her YouTube channel is. But please, just like for your clients, don't be afraid to ask. We're here to help and educate you and your clients so they can get to retirement with a peace of mind, even if they have someone that they're very concerned about. Now, next week, Carrie Chadoff is going to be joining for our agency, marketing agency, to answer all of your questions. What is your version of lead generation? So he's here to help you take your business to the next level. And we hope you join us next week at the same time, same location. Betsy Larson, as always, I've got a lot of love for you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. And to everybody here who joined us today, thank you for joining us. And whatever you do today, make it a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bucket Plan on Demand, brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Subscribe today for the latest episodes and insights. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help support and enhance your advisory business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.